Good evening, everyone. My name is David Johnson. I am the owner principal of TransformEd Consulting, and we're here on Cassandra Williams' platform, Educational Innovations 360 Degrees, and we are conducting a live chat with Mr. John Lay of Talented Learning.
Hello, everyone.
Evening, John. How are you, sir?
Good evening. Good evening. Thanks for having me today.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you here. John Lay is CEO and lead analyst at Talent Learning and the Talented Learning Center. John is a fiercely independent consultant, blogger, and podcaster who helps organizations select and implement learning technology strategies, primarily for extended enterprise applications. His advice is based upon more than 25 years of learning tech industry experience, serving as a trusted LMS selection and sales advisor to more than 125 learning organizations with a total technology spend of more than $100 million. Congratulations, sir. Very impressive. Very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, tell us about your background. How did you become such a power in the educational technology field?
It was all by accident, like all good things in life. But young in my career, I got a master's degree in instructional technology, and kind of an introverted person. But what it taught me was how to learn anything, and then how to teach anything. And it kind of opened my eyes, and I got my first job out of school. And where I ended up getting was this organization that taught people how to be salespeople. And so before they would let me do any of the work on their content as an instructional designer, they put me through this year process to teach me enterprise sales. And basically, introverted guy to an enterprise salesperson, spent a whole career then selling learning systems technology. And then 8 years ago, I founded Talented Learning to help people buy learning technology, to try to take a career worth of best practices from the selling side, turn my hat around, and do some good in the industry by helping people buy better.
Mm-hmm. So when you say buy better, what does that mean?
Well, learning technology is not cheap. Certainly some learning technology is free. So authoring tools or learning management systems or learning experience providers, these are all technologies that organizations or individuals, but primarily organizations, use to run all training and keep track of all learning, all users, and the interrelationship between the two. And so it's not uncommon for organizations to spend 5, 10, 15, 100,000, $1 million on their learning system. And so what we help them do is help them go through a methodical process of understanding exactly what they need from a business standpoint, right, what their critical success factors are, exactly what their requirements are, so that they can conduct a mature and professional buying process, which limits the odds of them choosing wrong or choosing a system that's not right for them because they were following a haphazard process. So we help them go through that professional process and really limit the odds of them failing and increase the odds of them succeeding by doing it in a proven way.
I would imagine with the pandemic, there's been a great demand for your services.
Yeah, how about it? Sometimes just being in the right place at the right time. So it's certainly no fun or enjoyment benefiting off of something like a pandemic. But the silver lining is that everybody in the world needed immediately the ability to educate people online, to communicate virtually. And that's what I've spent my 25 plus year career doing. This is what the industry has spent our last 30, 35 years doing, is figuring that out and doing that better and teaching better and understanding the benefits of online learning. So when the pandemic happened, not just me, but other consultants like myself and all learning management system companies and all e-learning content creation companies and all mobile app creation companies, all of us, all at the same time, we're inundated with inbound requests for help from all types of organizations and individuals to help go over this leap. So in some ways, it's been a fascinating year because what we've been working on for decades, we've made more progress in 15 months than we probably made in the last 3 years combined, or even more.
As a school person, I know that a lot of school districts said we were going to do this over 7 years, and we've done it in 7 months or 2 months.
That's exactly it. The pace of digital acceleration is just exponential now to what it was, and it's the same in education and K through 12 and universities or in corporations. They took a longer term approach of that transition from 100% live to somewhere of 100% online or somewhere in between, typically an in between. But organizations of all types had the leisure of taking their time and going step by step. But when this happened overnight, that leisure was gone, and organizations of all types found themselves really super prepared and able to take the next step and really make advantage of this, or completely on their heels and wishing they wouldn't have taken such a lengthy, laborious path to the transformation of their organization digitally.
Well, John, I am very, very happy to have you here tonight and impressed by your background. Our topic for this evening is how to create your own online university, your own online university. That is a great aspiration. And we have 7 topics: business case, the required technology, content strategy, packaging and pricing, marketing, finding learners who care, costs to get going, and finally, advice for getting started. Shall we start with making the business case?
We're going to do all that in 1.5 hour segment?
Yes, sir.
Man, that's going to be special. Let's get to it.
Okay. What's the business case, my friend?
So the business case, so as we were talking about just a minute ago, learning technology costs something. So maybe take a step back. The business case of creating your own university. So who can create their own university? And as we talked about, it could be anybody from corporations or schools like you would think of. But the new development over the last couple of years is for subject matter experts or educators or trainers or people with a unique set of intellectual capabilities or content or experience. So there's different solutions out there in the industry that allow everybody from an individual to a corporation to create their own online university, but it costs money. And so whenever something costs money, you need a business case, because a business case is the language of business. So it is, what am I going to sell? Who am I going to sell it to? How much am I going to sell it for? How much? Where am I going to find my learners? How much is it going to take me to create the content? How long is it good for? Is there a need in the marketplace? Mm-hmm. But it's all those things to figure out, do you really have a business? And maybe a better way to phrase it is the content that you can create and sell unique enough to be worth the trouble?
Now, your next bullet is monetize your expertise. And you spoke of SMEs, subject matter experts. Mm-hmm. So are you suggesting that if you have a certain expertise, you could possibly monetize it?
Oh my gosh, yes. So I'm the case in point. My website or our online university is www.talentedlearningcenter.com. And I spent my pandemic year, in addition to consulting and helping other folks, but we spent our year building our own online university to teach other people how to build their own online university, whether that's from SMEs all the way to corporations. So my personal expertise and my 25 years of career of selling enterprise learning technology and mm-hmm. helping people buy enterprise learning technology is unique enough that it doesn't really exist in any other place in the world.
Now, John, you used the term, I'm sorry, you used the term university. So would you define university in this case?
Well, a university could certainly mean accredited university, which would be, from the academia world as yourself. That would be your first thought. But in the world of online universities, it's much broader than that. It could be private, it could be academic based, it could be to a nonprofit institution or an association. But essentially, it's an online place that brings together a community of learners and content that are relevant to each other. And so you could have online universities. Our Talented Learning Center is an online university about learning technology. There's other learning centers that are about growing Christmas trees. There's other learning centers about educating the top of the line plastic surgeons in America. Each one, there's just a countless plethora of universities out there, but the common thing they have is expertise in content that you can't get anywhere else, and then learners who care about that. Plastic surgeons who care about that, advanced plastic surgeon, Christmas tree growers who want to get better.
And so that would be a way of monetizing the content, ensuring that it is targeted to a particular audience.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So, you spend your life on online like everybody else does. And so there's unlimited content. There's unlimited places to go. You can go to there's anywhere that you can go to learn information. So you have to find learners that would want to come to your site, that want to see the content that you have packaged in a way that has value and that they can't find somewhere else for free. If those conditions exist, then the opportunity to monetize that exists, and monetize it basically means that you can make money off it. You can sell that content either one at a time, or sell a subscription so that they have access to it over time. But it's a way to start building revenue in small pieces from the assembly of your intellectual property into a piece of content, which can look.
Well, let's talk about required technology.
So what do you need to do something like this? Well, it's not as much as you think, but it's more than you would hope in some ways. But the required technology, the backbone of it is a learning management system. And when people think learning management systems, a lot of times they think back 30 or 25 years of the big old fashioned, we all hate our LMSs. But that really is 20 or 30 years ago. Since the evolution of the cloud, we went from about 20 learning systems to 1,000 learning systems in our industry. And so there's lots and lots of learning systems out there. When I use the word, a lot of times I won't even use the word LMS, because learning system is even broader, because it's really any application that keeps track of learners and content. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, from different types of learning management systems to things called learning experience providers or learning experience platforms. But generally what you need is something that allows you to have content and to sell that content and have learners consume that content, and then be able to keep track of that from a reporting standpoint. So those are the main things that you need.
We'll talk a little bit about CRM, customer relationship management, and how that relates to online learning.
So that's for anybody that's in education or HR or training, the word CRM, you're like, what could that be? But it's a customer relationship management software. The most popular one that you would hear of would be like Salesforce, and HubSpot would be another one, or Microsoft Dynamics. But these are what organizations, primarily on the corporate or business side, use to keep track of all the data about their prospective customers and their customers. So everything from what white papers are people downloading, to what web pages are they looking at, or what pages are they reviewing, to what trade shows did they stop by the booth, to what products did they buy and what training. A CRM keeps track of all of that. And so a CRM a lot of times works hand in hand with an LMS, so that you know what somebody bought, so that you could provide them the right training, for example.
And it becomes a marketing tool, I would imagine.
Exactly. So then it goes the other way. The CRM also is used to, say there's 1,000 people out there. You could send them all an email offering a special, for example. Maybe 100 of them would take advantage of that, and they would come into the LMS. When they completed that training, that completion would be recorded in the CRM, and maybe that would put them on another list for another type of promotion down the way. So that back and forth of tying the business to the training and training completion is part of the whole strategy of creating a really successful online university. Once again, for an individual or a person. So our online university is so tightly integrated with HubSpot, our CRM, and we're just daily passing just tons of information back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
This is good information. Let's move on to content strategy. What's the difference between authoring and I see you
assembling.
Have assembling.
Yeah,
what's the difference between authoring and assembling?
So authoring content, if anybody's like created online content or consumed online content, a more formal self-paced thing, where you first see an objective screen perhaps, and, then you get presented some information, you do some interactivity, maybe take some questions. You go through that typical course experience, you take a test at the end. That type of environment is usually authored in what's called an authoring tool, which is a third-party tool that you can create content. And once it's created, you can run it on your website, or you can run it in any LMS in the world once you create that content. So one of the things that you have to determine is, are you going to author that? How are you going to author your content? What's going to be the process to do that? And are you going to do it formal like that? Or are you going to do it more informal by just assembling assets that you already have? So what a lot of subject matter experts and educators do is they have a video of this, And then they have a worksheet here, and then a step action guide that they created here, and then a PowerPoint that they use to teach this particular class. And they create a path of assets. They assemble those assets into a learning experience. Both of them are online learning experiences, but the latter is an easy way when you're creating your own online university, of not trying to boil the ocean, but starting with things you have and assembling that content. And that's a way that you can get out of the gate a lot quicker for a lot less money than trying to create a formal online learning module, which takes time, effort, and money.
Well, John, I would say to you that educators would be most interested in the content strategy because, of course, we are accustomed to writing curriculum.
Sure.
So one of the questions I have, and you're an instructional systems technology expert, which ways can we use that content, that curriculum, to make it most effective for the learner?
That's a great question. And I ask, on my own podcast, I ask a lot of experts the same thing on, what's the way to make this content the most? And the prevailing, and I think the most cutting edge theory right now when creating your own line is to do two things at the same time. You want to create your content in the smallest possible building block DNAs as possible. So the 1, 2, 3 minute type things. So it might be a video on what is an online university, for example, 1 minute, 2 minute explanation like we had at the beginning of this call, all the way to taking those pieces and assembling those into paths or curricula or certification or certificate paths or the more formal. Because the idea that people, as they enter into your online university, sometimes they want learning on the spot for performance support, and they just want that building block and to be able to find it and consume it. And other times they're like, I want to get this certificate to be a phlebotomist because I'd like to earn an extra $5 an hour in the hospital. And so I'm going to take this formal path and then pass this particular certificate. And so, but the content of the certificate in the formal path is made up of the building block DNA. So the best thing to do is to create a strategy that you can see the DNA and then how you're going to assemble that pieces. So that's what the most progressive organizations that I see and interview around the world are doing at the same time.
So by making small building blocks, you're able to interchange them or place them in different learning paths.
Exactly. Combine that DNA to make different animals. And so you could combine that DNA to make a short lesson, or you combine those short lessons to make a course, and those courses to make something else. Or you could have those different DNA. So this is where things get so much fun now in 2021. You have that different DNA, but each one of those nuggets is tied to a learning objective and a skill or a competency and a pre-assessment question. And so you can ask a pre-assessment question and then give a custom adaptive path through the content based on somebody's inherent or existing level of competency, for example.
That is great. That is great. Thank you for
cool
that
stuff.
example. It is cool stuff. Let's talk a little bit about packaging and pricing.
So now you got to think, okay, well, now I've got this intellectual capital and it's pretty special. And I have all these assets and now I've assembled them. And I think I found who I'm going to sell it to. And it's unique in the marketplace. All things are go on my university. But now what do I charge for this stuff? Is it worth $10? Is it worth $100? Do I just sell those little DNA pieces individually for $19.95, or do I say you can consume all you want, all you can eat, but you have to give me $200 a month or $500 a month? So these are the decisions that you'll have to make then, because just like a real business, you have your content. Now you have to figure out how you're going to sell it. And so the packaging and pricing strategy, and the LMSs enable this, is the different ways that you can assemble that DNA to drive an e-commerce experience, to get somebody to open up that wallet and pull out the credit card and type it in. That's the key part of monetizing. That's the hard part, as it turns out, in all businesses, is to make that piece happen. So the best organizations, or the best people that are creating their own online universities, strategize about what's out there in the marketplace and how their learners might need to consume it, and then align their pricing strategy to that. And then they do a whole the last part, the real subjective part, is the value-based part. Like, what do you get? What's in it for me if I consume this content? What am I going to do differently? What am I going to know that's going to make an impact, and why? And is that measurable? And that part, if you can, if there is value, one, and two, you articulate that value, then three, your price can be much higher than just, nominal stuff, because it all comes down to value. People will pay for it without a doubt.
John, this is great. You sound like a businessman, a technologist, and an educator all in one conversation.
That's funny you say that. The very first blog post that I wrote at Talented Learning 8 years ago, I defined a new professional inside the marketplace, and I call him an instructional marketer. And I described it exactly as you did, 1/3 of each of those parts.
That's great.
And I'm not alone. There's a whole cadre of us that are following the same path, which is a kind of a combination of university path plus a whole bunch of your own courses and learning in somebody else's online university, as it turns out.
Great. Well, let's move on to marketing, finding learners who care. You sort of touched on this already.
Yeah. So learners who care, that is, everybody's heard, the hackneyed phrase, if you build it, they will come, or, the negative flip side of that. But it's really a big concern. Content is expensive to create or assemble. It's not cheap to, set up your learning management system in time and to, get all those pieces there. And it's all too easy to do all of that and not sell anything, and not find, not get any traffic, not get anybody to even see that content. And that's the part that scares a lot of people about buying the university is, what if I do all this and, I can't sell any of it, or nobody even comes that even knows that it's for sale. So it's probably one of the most critical parts that a lot of people are unprepared for when they're thinking about building their own online university. So what you have to do. So I'm a bootstrapper. And what that means is I started my own company with our own money, nobody else's money. And so everything through a bootstrapping mentality is, what can you do for free before you start paying somebody? And so as it turns out with marketing, there's a lot you can do for free. And when you're creating your own online university, there's one special thing that you can do, and that is to blog. That is to create content about your specialty, because you have that specialty. You created the formal content. Now you need to take those DNAs and reassemble them again now into blog posts, into things that are public, so that people can search Google, find your site, say, wow, click on that. Now they're in your online university. And so each one of those blog posts that you write is free. It just takes your time after you get home from work, after you cash your W-2 paycheck. You can still write a blog post, and you can still start doing this while you're on somebody else's payroll, and start creating that footprint on Google that's going to allow people that care about things, that are going to Google the terms, that'll find their way to your site. So if you
How about the cost to get going?
The cost to get going is, for organizations, can be steep. For individuals, it's actually nominal, because you can find a lot of systems that are pay as you go. So 20 years ago, you had to pay $100,000 up front before you had a single user. Nowadays, you can go to a lot of sites and get a free trial for 15 or 30 days of their learning system, where you can start assembling and building your content and your pages and outlining your value propositions, and do all that before you even have to give them a credit card. See if it works. Then you give your credit card, and then you pay based on who's actually using the system. So you can start off like a lot of software on the lower tiers as you're building up your business and you're building up your traffic. And as you grow and you get more traffic and you sell more, well, then it becomes more expensive, but then it's palatable because you're not paying for it up front. You're paying because you're being successful, in which case you're usually very happy to write that check, or at least I am.
You had written that is, I guess what you were saying was, it's better to use other people's money when you're getting started, but you bootstrap. So how did you choose to bootstrap as opposed to use someone else's money? Yeah.
So there's my lesson. So at the end of every podcast, I ask people what their lesson was. Here's my lesson. Don't waste the W-2. So what I did is I left my job and I sat down and said, all right, I'm going to start a company. And then I figured it out with the pressure of the monthly mortgage on my shoulders. In retrospect, what I should have done is taken the 6 months before that and did a lot of the work that I did in the first couple of months. Started thinking through the business case. What is the technology I'm going to need? What is going to be my content strategy? How am I going to package this? Who am I going to market it to? How am I going to get them to the site? If I could have figured out those things from 6 to 8 at night while I'm still getting a paycheck every Friday, that'd be my best advice for somebody following in my footsteps. As it turns out, I did that all on my own dime, wishing that I was doing it on somebody else's in the evening.
So speak more about advice that you would give to others to get them started.
Yeah. So my first advice is to do exactly that. To most of the work in creating your own online university is the conceptual part of it. It's not something that you can, just go out and do your wood workshop and start building something. You can, but you'll never get anywhere, and you'll spend a lot of time doing it. A lot of what is in the success of the online universities that I see from SMEs to the biggest corporations is they build it to a business plan. They plan their work, they do it, they measure it, they improve, and they go through that cycle. But what they don't do is they don't try to make it perfect on day one, because they know it's not going to be. They get it to the 80%, they launch it, they measure, they improve, and you keep on going through that cycle. So my very best advice is that you can create an own online university. I think everybody has a unique set of content and experience that could be marketable, and you can do it in a real cost-effective way. Mm-hmm. But the trick is to get started and follow a plan and measure. And the measuring part is the key. So you can measure, for example, from a blog post to how many people read that, to how many people show up to your university, to how many people buy an actual course. And so you can measure all that. So you can say, well, that works great. Well, it looks like I need 3 blog posts a month instead of 2. And so now you can improve the whole program by, making that one improvement, and then measure how your next month goes and that process. So that's my best advice. And that's advice that I get from a lot of professionals when I ask the same question.
So John, if there would be one takeaway, if you could boil everything in our conversation down to one takeaway, what would that be, sir?
That's a good question. Get me a brevity. That's a hard thing to do as a host. I think if there's one takeaway right now is that individual educators and SMEs now have an opportunity to take that knowledge and do something with it other than what they've been doing in their own particular schools or universities. And you can do something with that from a monetized way, like we talked about today, but you can also do something with that knowledge from an altruistic way and make the world a better place by doing everything that we talked about today, but focus less on the money part. And both of them are viable paths. And both of them, I think, are paths that normal people can take that aren't technical, that aren't educators, but really want to learn how to do the mix of those three with the marketing aspect. Mm-hmm. It's not impossible. In fact, it's really easy. And like most things in life, it's it's easy once you know how. And so there you go.
Sir, what is your call to action?
Well, my call to action, if any of this sounds interesting, we build an online university to teach you how to build an online university. I encourage you to go to www.talentedlearningcenter.com, and you can check it out, and you can see what an online university looks like, how you look for content, what the catalog looks like, see how we structured, from a cost. And our strategy was to make it all consumed for one price a month or one price a year, so you could have all the content versus worried about it. But you can see exactly everything that we talked about today. You can see reflected on the talentedlearningcenter.com. And if any of that looks interested and you want to sign up,
well, tell them how to contact you, John.
Yeah, the easiest way to do it is just jlay@talentedlearning.com. If you send me an email, I'll go ahead and send you back a coupon that'll give you 50% off for the first year just for being on this podcast, just so you can educators get a chance to get in there in a low-cost way to take some of this content.
Well, John, thank you very much for being our guest tonight. And I certainly have learned a lot, and I will be in touch with you, particularly to speak about content and how to make content effective from a remote location for learners. It's been a pleasure Been a pleasure having you as our guest, and I look forward to speaking with you again. This has been our live chat over Cassandra Williams' platform of Educational Innovations 360 Degrees, and I'm David Johnson from Transform Ed Consulting. Thank you all for being with us this evening. Bye-bye, John.
Everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.